Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Green Talk. Just a few reminders. Please be sure to sign in to iClicker Cloud. And we have a Q&A at the end of our talk. So be sure to stay until the end of the Q&A. And I'll go ahead now and introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Monica Chen, who's National Program Director for Factory Farm Awareness Coalition. And she is a UC Berkeley graduate. Her bachelor's degree is in American Studies with emphasis on environmental education and public policy. So I'll let her tell you the rest of her story and about the organization. Okay, so let's give her a warm welcome.
Great, thank you. I just want to check to make sure this is on. Can you give me a thumbs up in the back if you can hear me? Wonderful. So yes, my name is Monica Chen. I am the National Programs Director of FFAC. FFAC was founded by students at UC Berkeley who realized that at Cal there are a lot of courses that tangentially touch upon public health, social justice, the environment, but might not be talking about food. So as undergraduates, students went to the professors and said, hey, can we give these presentations? And they've been so well received that we have become a national nonprofit. My journey to FFAC has been a little bit more like this, very meandering. After graduating, earned my master's in education. I was a classroom teacher for a while on the Navajo reservation. I then taught environmental education. I've also worked in sexual health, and also I work with the Prison University Project, helping students get their AA degrees, so I teach the English classes there. And I say all these things because I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I firmly believe that food is connected to a lot of different social justice issues, and so I'm excited to talk to you about some of those, especially focusing on the environment today. This is an outline of what I'll be going over. I want to make sure that we have a firm understanding or basic understanding of what factory farming is. Then we'll delve into the environmental impacts and then the health impacts which are related to the environmental impacts. And finally, we will focus on solutions because as engineering students, I know we're all about solutions. So I'm excited to go over those. Brief caveat, factory farming is disturbing. There is no way to talk about it without it being disturbing. At the same time, I did not come to today's presentation to traumatize everybody and to make them feel bad. Really, there is nothing bloody or gory in anything that I'm going to be showing you. And again, we are very solutions-oriented. So to start off, I wanted to ask you all, who, raise your hand, sang Old MacDonald when they were a child? Who is familiar with that song? Pretty much everyone, right? I grew up in Sunnyvale, so San Jose State was my local CSU. I remember growing up in this area. I remember singing that song. Whenever I was driving along 280, I remember seeing cows on the sides of the road. Has anybody else seen that before too? Yeah. And this idea of cows and this gorgeous pasture land, this happy setting, was reinforced by the marketing. Whenever I went to a grocery store, I saw ads like this. The truth of the matter, though, is that we have these things called concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, CAFOs, which are defined by the intensive confinement of thousands or tens of thousands of animals in a single space to maximize product, make the most bacon, sausage, whatever, to make the most profit, to make the most money. In these industries, cow production, pig production, broiler chicken production, thanks to horizontal and vertical integration, we are seeing that 4 companies really control the vast majority of production, which has resulted in the loss of family farms. These factory farms will often say that they are providing a great service to society by providing so much cheap food, and it is true that as a percentage of American income, less money is now being spent on food. But as we are about to see, that cheap food comes at a very steep price. So, it is 2019. My question to you all is, how many animals would you guess are raised and killed for meat, eggs, and milk in the US every single year? So I'm not asking about fish, just livestock. Any guesses? 500 million? Great guess. Any other guesses? Yes?
750 million.
3/4 billion. Okay. So let's think about some numbers. First of all, there's about 340-ish million Americans, right? Are those people eating meat occasionally or every single day, multiple times per day, right? When you do that multiplication, the number ends up being 9 billion, almost 10 billion, okay? So we are raising more animals for food in the United States than we have people on the entire planet. And compared to the rest of the world, population-wise, this is a very large impact. Now, of those 9 billion animals, my next question to you all is, what percentage of those animals are raised in those tight conditions on those factory farms? Any guesses? 90. Yeah. Somebody said 98%. The answer is 99%. Okay. What this means is virtually all meat, dairy, and eggs sold in the United States is coming from a factory farm. Whenever you go out to a restaurant, when you go to a grocery store, it's coming from one of these factory farms. And that's why I do the work that I do, because I believe that if we are directly ingesting this, we need to know what it is. Now, this is a quote from National Hog Farmer magazine. This is the magazine that people in the industry are reading, and this is a quote. It says, "The breeding sow should be thought of and treated as a valuable piece of machinery whose function is to pump out baby pigs like a sausage machine." And what I want us to get from this quote is simply that we are not treating these animals as though they are living sentient beings anymore. We are treating them as units of production. And it is this mindset that allows us to treat these animals in a way that we would never imagine treating our dogs or our cats. We have these situations where we have unnatural problems leading to unnatural solutions. So, for example, we might have had a pig in an auditorium this large, but we thought, hey, wouldn't it be so much more profitable if we put 100 pigs inside of this room? Well, the problem then became when the mother pigs were lying down, they were literally lying down on top of their babies and suffocating them. So our solution to that was to put them in these gestation crates that are so small they can't even turn around. And so you see this with the cow industry. These are some chickens in battery cages, turkeys on a factory farm. This is what is normal. This is just the standard. Now, because this is San Jose, I know that a lot of you have access to many different grocery stores, and I want to ask the audience, who here has ever seen cage-free as a label on a package of eggs in a grocery store? So pretty much everyone, right? So cage-free is a label that I'm starting to see in a lot of different places, and I want to be clear that cage-free does mean that the chickens are not in those super tight battery cages, but they are still packed inside of these warehouses. And just like in the battery cages, those chickens do not have enough room to move around. They can't perform their natural pecking that they like to do at the ground. So an unnatural problem then is that the chickens will peck at each other, and they could even kill each other. They go crazy. Our unnatural solution to that problem is to literally debeak them, to cut off their beaks without any anesthetic. This is the standard. Another term that you might see in grocery stores is free range. And free range does mean that the chicken should have, quote unquote, access to the outdoors. And so I brought in this example from Judy's Family Farm, very specifically because Judy's Family Farm is located about 2 hours north of here. And on their package of eggs, it says, "These hens are raised in wide open spaces in Sonoma Valley where they are free to roam, scratch, and play." The picture on the right is an aerial photo of what Judy's Family Farm actually looks like. So you can see from this photo that we have these gigantic sheds. Even if those doors are closed, it counts as free range because the door does mean that theoretically the animals have access. And does anybody know what this pink stuff is? Okay, well, we'll get into that. Now, Judy's Family Farm supplies well-known brands like Whole Foods 365 and Organic Valley, brands that I believe people are paying more for because they have the ideal of chickens running around on grass, but that's just not the reality. And again, it comes down to the scale. If you have 340 million people all eating animal products in such quantities, then you're going to have these factory farms. A final term that I want to talk about is organic. When you purchase an organic egg, it has more to do with inputs, so that chicken was not fed hormones, antibiotics, or pesticides, which I would argue is better for your health, but that says nothing about the animal welfare. Okay. And at the end of every section, I'm sorry I forgot to mention this, you'll see that we randomly have these cuteness interludes. The reason for this is because we know that it's a lot of heavy information, and we do want to give people an opportunity to write down notes so that they can ask us questions at the end. All right, so we will now move into the environmental impacts. Animal agriculture is one of the single most destructive industries on the planet. And as a kid who grew up in Sunnyvale, this blew my mind because I felt that I was trained to think of environmental degradation as huge oil companies spilling into the bay, or the Chevron refinery in Richmond polluting the air. How could Old MacDonald be so bad? And it, again, comes down to the scale. We have 9 billion living, breathing, eating, pooping animals, and this is where the problems start to come in. First of all, these animals are being fed genetically modified corn and soy that's grown in monocultures. Have any of you been to the Midwest? Not a lot of you, this is California. Californians tend to fly from West Coast to East Coast and back again, and we don't go to the middle part, I understand. But if you were to go, and for this scattering of hands, you probably saw a lot of corn and soy. What used to be prairies and marshes is now just one product, all right? And there's a lot of problems with that. The first has to do with inefficiency. So forgetting about this graph for a second, I want you to imagine that you have $100 in your pocket right now. I want to offer you a deal. Would you give me that $100 if in exchange I gave you a coupon worth $40? Deal? No, right? That's a silly deal. Even a small child wouldn't take that deal. Okay, that's a silly question. What if you gave me $100 and in exchange I gave you a voucher to your favorite restaurant that was worth $3? Deal? No, of course not. But that is what we are doing with our food system. Because for every 100 calories of corn and soy that we feed to animals, we get back 40 calories worth of milk down to just 3 calories worth of beef. Another way to think about this is if you have a dog, if you were to stockpile all the dog food that your dog eats in an entire year, the weight of that dog food, the calories in that dog food is far greater than the actual flesh on the dog's bones itself. And this matters because we have world hunger. We have a growing global population. This study found that if everyone ate half as much meat, we could use that land, so take half of the land that's growing just corn and just soy, and use that land to grow fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, food for people to eat directly. If we did that, we could feed everyone on Earth plus an extra 2 billion people. Some of you may have heard that the Amazon is burning. It's been making a lot of national headlines, international headlines. I want to be clear that one of the leading causes of this deforestation occurring is because we want to burn the trees so that we have more room to grow corn and soy and more room to put cattle. There was a time on this planet when 100% of mammals were wild. But now you can see that humans and livestock make up about 96% of mammals on this planet. When we think about overpopulation, we tend to think only in terms of people, but really we're looking at an overpopulation of livestock. Okay. So we've got all this corn and soy that we're growing. Another issue related to that is water. And as Californians, I bet you have all heard about the drought. Raise your hand if you know about the drought. Okay. Keep your hand raised if you can tell me one thing that you were told as a kid to do to conserve water. What were you told to do?
Well, I remember I was told keep short showers and also to recycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but conserving water, I think I was also told as a teenager that one time somebody, one class I had in this speech, if you go running, you will lose ounce of water.
Okay. Yeah, you're covering a lot of different things. If you go to saveourwater.org, the typical things are to, reuse water that you got from the rain and put it onto your lawn, or plant native plants. I've gone to many hundreds of schools in the Bay Area, and every single student that I ask, typically first thing is take shorter showers. And a lot of those are related to our direct water usage, and we're not so much thinking about our indirect water usage. It turns out that if somebody were to skip a gallon of milk one time, it would be the equivalent of not showering for 27 days. And this statistic confuses a lot of people because this gallon of milk looks so innocuous. How could a gallon of milk require so much water? And to your point, right, that gallon of milk, you have to remember that cow was eating corn and soy, which required water. It's drinking water, there's all the production. So literally, a gallon of milk does take up 27 showers worth of water. In California in particular, there's a lot of concern about almond milk using water. This graphic I got from the New York Times. And you can see that almond milk does use up a decent amount of water, but you can still see that it's way less than cow's milk. Sometimes after presentations, I think that folks want to hear me tell them exactly what to purchase or buy, and I never tell anybody what to eat or what to drink. I'm just showing you the facts. And so maybe if you're concerned about water, you would want to drink, I don't know, soy milk. But you might want to think more holistically and think about land use and carbon emissions. All right. So we have these 9 billion animals. They are consuming all of this GMO corn and soy. They're being fed a lot of water, not to mention the hormones to get big really fast, and antibiotics so they don't get sick. It goes through all their systems, and what does it come out as? It comes out as waste. That's a very nice way of putting it. I used to be an environmental educator, though, so I know a lot of synonyms. All right, so these farm animals in the U.S. are producing 100 times as much poop as the entire U.S. human population. And I was originally going to show you a video, but I've decided to just show you some pictures of what we're talking about today. Oops. Okay, so this right here is an example of a hog factory farm. This one is located in North Carolina. You can see all of these sheds. When these pigs defecate, their waste falls through the cracks and it enters this gigantic pool. There are many of these farms. This is just one. The pool is, the size of 4 football fields. Okay, we do not have any concrete lining for this. We're just like, we got to deal with the waste. Now, eventually, that waste will fill up. So, brilliant engineering students, what do you think we do with that waste? I'm sorry, and you all can somebody raise their hand? Yeah.
Funnel it off and divert it to other places?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we are doing. It's just that is very clear pollution. So what we're trying to do is we spray it into the air. So if you're familiar with a garden hose, it's a very similar concept. So we're hoping that by spraying the waste, which by the way is toxic with all the antibiotics, hormones, and stuff like that, into the air, then it'll just sort of disappear and evaporate. The problem with this is that there are people who literally live in these areas. And so this is Elsie. In the video, she's explaining how when it's raining, this poop waste, you think that it's just regular rain, but it's not. And there's a lot of studies showing that people who live near these factory farms are much more likely to have respiratory issues such as asthma. And Elsie Herring is, somebody whose grandfather was a slave. They got this land from their former slave owner. So there's a lot related to environmental racism as well. And they pull out that term very specifically, and I want to take a moment to talk about what I mean by that. Because growing up here, I feel like I was taught that since everybody can sit anywhere they want on a bus or drink out of whatever water fountain they want, then we don't have racism anymore. Environmental racism, again, is pulled out in this clip. And I wanted to bring this to sort of here at San Jose State. Suppose a hog factory farm wanted to open up near campus. Would you all be okay with that? No. And the honest truth is that here in Silicon Valley, we would use our political resources, our financial resources, our education. We would fight back and we would say, no, we do not want this hog factory farm in our community. We do not want our children to get sick. We would say, NIMBY, not in my backyard, because we also still do want to eat bacon and sausage, right? Okay, so the hog factory farm says, never mind, we won't go to San Jose. They might go to another community. Again, if people have the resources to fight back, never mind. So where do you think a hog factory farm is going to end up? In the lowest income communities, which tend to be communities of color. A lot of times you'll hear factory farms saying, well, we're really doing a service because we are providing so many jobs to the community. But it's a little bit like Walmart. When Walmart goes to a community, the small little hardware store might go out of business, the small little grocery store, so you're losing jobs. And again, if you think about what's happening in Middle America, many farmers have lost their jobs. Okay, the other thing that I didn't mention is that this photo was taken more than a year ago. With the advent of hurricanes like Hurricane Florence, we're having to deal with this. So you can imagine when Hurricane Florence whipped through this area, does it look like this cesspool is covered in any way? No. So that led to situations like this, literal pollution. And that I'm really excited that this is a GreenTalk because when I was an environmental educator, I've literally told 30,000 kids to bring their reusable water bottles. Many of you probably also have reusable water bottles, which is great. And our message for, I think, over a decade, to be an environmentalist, you should bring a reusable water bottle. My question to you now, though, is can everybody drink water out of the tap? No, right? So I want us to be considerate of that in our messaging. Unfortunately, water contamination in communities of color is nothing new. We've seen what happened in Flint, Michigan. The lady here on the right, she lives in San Joaquin Valley, where there are dairy farms, and so her water is contaminated as well. Are any of you from SoCal? Yeah? Okay. Have any of you ever driven down I-5 between here and LA, right? Do you know that section that smells really badly? Okay. So most of the factory farms are not going to be located in these cities like San Jose and LA. They'll be in the middle part of California or in other poor, low-income areas. Now, the other issue with all this poop is that it does contribute to climate change. We know that animal agriculture causes more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector combined. And I bring that up because if you look at a lot of climate action plans, sustainability plans at colleges, at cities, at the state level, they're still very focused on transportation, and it is difficult to be talking about animal agriculture and food. Okay. But the impact from animal ag is so great that if, hypothetically, everyone in the US ate no meat or cheese just one day a week, it would be like taking 7.6 million cars off of the road. And I ask you all, can you convince 5 people in your life to sell their cars and never drive again? No, it's really hard. But I do think it's possible to convince a couple people to start eating plant-based one day a week. That would have a very large impact. Okay, please be writing down your questions. We're going to delve into the environmental section now, which again is related to environmental health. Okay, so here we are in health. I want you to imagine that we close off all of these doors and say nobody can leave. What happens if one of us gets sick? Everybody's going to get sick, right? It's the exact same situations on these factory farms. So our solution to that is to just give all the animals antibiotics. Has anybody in this class ever been on antibiotics before? Okay. Those of you raising your hands, did you just stay on antibiotics? Did the doctor say, hey, just keep on taking antibiotics, it's good for you? No. Does anybody know why? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So if your body becomes resistant to it, right, that leaves you vulnerable. Here's what's happening on these factory farms. We are giving most antibiotics in the United States, not to people, but again, to our livestock. And when we just give all the animals antibiotics, that creates the perfect environment for antibiotic-resistant bacteria, or superbugs. So then we're just like giving everybody some more antibiotics. And again, superbugs. We know that MRSA kills more Americans every year than AIDS does. I would argue that we do not hear as much about MRSA. We hear a lot more about AIDS, and I want us to be considerate of who is more likely to have MRSA. People living near factory farms, people who work on factory farms, which again tend to be very low-income people. This antibiotic-resistant bacteria is also found in the food that we are eating. There are different grades of meat, so if an animal is already dead before it gets to the slaughterhouse, then that animal should not be fed to humans. That's the kind of stuff that we are feeding to our pets, so be really careful what you're feeding your animals. A step above that is the kind of stuff that's ground up, so you'll see that in this study, they found high levels of antibiotic-resistant bacteria on these meats, including on 81% of ground turkey. When an animal is slaughtered, according to the USDA, its body temperature has to be lowered. And the way that we do that is we take big pools of very cold water and we just dump all the chickens in there. Can you imagine what happens if there's poop or some kind of antibiotic-resistant bacteria on one chicken? It's just going to spread into this gigantic pool. And during that entire time, the chicken is just absorbing all of that water, right, including that potentially that antibiotic-resistant bacteria. A chicken that has absorbed all that water, it's generally not going to taste that good. And really, when you purchase something at the grocery store, such as a pound of chicken, you are paying for that water weight. All of this stuff here at the bottom, a lot of people think are like the juices of the chicken. It's really a lot of that absorbed water. That doesn't taste very good, so literally you can watch YouTube videos on this. We take injection needles and we plump up that chicken with sodium. It's called sodium plumping. We add salt to it. And I bring this up because I go to a lot of communities where kids are eating Kentucky Fried Chicken. And we cannot expect those kids to, after hearing all this information, just say, oh, I'm going to go and eat a zucchini now, because they are so used to eating something that's really salty like this. These are the top 10 leading causes of death in the United States. The ones that I've highlighted in red are specifically related to an overconsumption of animal products, heart disease, cancer, etc. And growing up, I came from an immigrant family. Does anybody remember the food pyramid? Or are you too young? Okay. Remember how the food pyramid had a very specific section on eating meat? Okay. So again, immigrant family. My grandmother probably heard at one point that you should eat meat in order to be strong, and she's said that over and over to me my entire life. She was very concerned that if I didn't eat meat every single day, that I would just die. So it's really helpful that now, instead of the food pyramid, has anybody seen My Plate? That's the new dietary guidelines. It actually doesn't say to eat meat anymore. It says to eat protein. And Kaiser Permanente, which is probably where a lot of you have your health insurance, their doctors are actually recommending a plant-based diet to a lot of their patients, especially those with high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or obesity. That being said, though, I know this picture looks ridiculous. You're wondering why I'm showing it. I have found that my grandmother really believed that you had to eat meat to be strong. And I think that that idea is reinforced throughout society, that you have to eat meat in order to be muscular, and it's especially tied to masculinity. I have entire presentations about this topic as well. And so I wanted to share a clip from a new movie that came out called Game Changers, and you're going to see that it was actually, I believe, produced by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger! I ate a lot of meat. They showed us commercials. Steak. That's what a man eats. Selling that idea that real men eat meat. Serious man food. But you got to understand, that's marketing. That's not based on reality.
I've been teaching fighting techniques to government agencies for more than 15 years. Then I got injured. Unable to teach for at least 6 months. I spent more than 1,000 hours studying science on recovery and nutrition, and stumbled across a study about the Roman gladiators.
The gladiators were predominantly vegetarian.
How could the original professional fighters be so powerful, eating only plants?
When I made the switch to a plant-based diet, I qualified for my 3rd Olympic team. I broke 2 American records. I was like, man, I should have done this a long while ago.
When I went plant-based, I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. And I actually became like a machine.
One of the biggest misconceptions in sports nutrition is that we have to have animal protein to perform at a high level. That's just not true.
Sometimes you have to do things that you know your competitors aren't doing.
Today's blood and yesterday's blood. I think this is going to wake a lot of people up.
I was recovering better, not getting as sore. This was our best season in the last 15 years, and we had 14 guys on plant-based diets. We were going to feel great, have more energy.
Cholesterol was 276. Today, 169.
Oh, now you're talking. Most guys my age can keep up with the grandchildren. My grandchildren can't keep up with me.
It's not one set of dietary guidelines for improving your performance as an athlete, another one for reversing heart disease, reversing diabetes. It's the same for all of them.
Someone asked me, how could you get as strong as an ox without eating any meat? And my answer was, have you ever seen an ox eating meat?
All right, so that is a movie that you could watch. I actually believe that as of yesterday, you can purchase it. It's called Game Changers. People are eating the standard American diet, SAD, because they have it available, because it's tasty, and because they think it's healthy. And so I want to address each of those things because they are important. But in terms of health, it is a complete myth that you can't get enough protein from non-meat sources. Does anybody here know exactly how many grams of protein they need for their body type and athletic exercising every day? Yeah, you do? Okay, how many grams?
I weightlift and I need 110 for my level of FFAC.
Awesome, that's great. Okay, does anybody else know how many they need? Okay, a couple more. So the vast majority of people in this class do not know the exact amount of grams that they need for their body. But getting more protein is just considered a good thing. There are tons of restaurants that say pick your grain, and then they say pick your protein, and they make it sound like you need to be eating protein very specially. But for the average woman, it's 46 grams. For the average man, it's 56 grams. The average American gets triple the amount of protein that they need. And that's not a good thing, leading to a lot of the issues that you've seen earlier. Here are some plant foods that are high in protein. And then here are some plant foods that are high in iron. Again, we are often told that we need to eat something very specifically, but you'll see that there's overlap in a lot of these foods. All right, now we're getting to my favorite slide of the presentation, which is countries affected by lactose intolerance. So to start off with, does anybody know where dairy comes from? I know now you think that I'm giving you a trick question. Okay, it comes from cows, thank you. But sometimes I ask that question here in the Bay Area, and a lot of people would say cartons or the grocery store. Because we're urban consumers, we're really disconnected from our food. The kids don't know. So yes, it comes from cows. Now, contrary to popular belief, cows are not magical lactating machines. What has to happen before a cow produces any milk? She has to have a baby, right? So for us humans to be drinking that milk means that that baby calf is not drinking that milk. This map here is showing you the darker regions where people are more likely to be lactose intolerant. So you can see a lot of Asian people, a lot of African people, a lot of native and indigenous people, they are lactose intolerant. We drink milk in this country because Europeans drank milk, and they colonized this land, and now a lot of people are trying to adapt to a diet that they're not as genetically adapted for. We've been told that we need to drink milk in order to build strong bones, right? Has anybody seen that marketing? Okay, so look at a country like China, right? 80 to 100% lactose intolerant. And by the way, it's not like when people who are lactose intolerant, they drink milk and they die, right? Does anybody know what the symptoms of lactose intolerance are? Yeah? Yeah, digestive issues. Actually, when I was on the Navajo reservation teaching 3rd grade, all my kids were lactose intolerant. But because we were a very low-income school, we had free breakfast and free lunch. And whenever I had to do cafeteria duty, it was literally my job to go around and tell the kids, hey, open your milk, open your milk, open your milk. And my principal would be on me about this because if the kids did not open their milk, we wouldn't get our funding, okay? In a school where I had very little school supplies, every single year I would get posters to use as book covers or to place in the cafeteria that had pictures of, Taylor Swift with milk mustaches, right? Many of you have probably seen a Got Milk ad featuring a milk mustache. There was a time when 80% of us saw that kind of ad every single day. The idea that we need to be drinking dairy to build strong bones is completely false. So again, in China, there's not a single Chinese dish that contains dairy or cheese, right? People in China have way lower rates of osteoporosis than we do in the United States. And the reason for that is because there's a protein in cow's milk that inhibits the uptake of calcium. So if you're looking for absorbable calcium, here are some sources. And I know that I'm flipping through these slides quickly, so I also have these little leaflets that are up here at the front and on the way back as you're leaving that you can take on your way out. It also has recipes. Okay, so now let's be talking about food access. Who here is aware of the Farm Bill? A few of you? Okay. Well, I'm really glad that you are here today because I think that we should all know about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill passes through Congress every 5 years. The 2014 Farm Bill was worth $489 billion in subsidies. You can see that most of that subsidy went to meat and dairy, and then to grains, which we feed to meat and dairy. So there is a reason why a Big Mac is cheaper than a salad in a lot of places. There is a reason why if you go to where I live in East Oakland, there might be liquor stores, and what is available is hot dogs and Takis and Cheetos. Less than 1% of that $489 billion is going to fruits and vegetables. So our government is literally not subsidizing the healthy and nutritious foods. They are subsidizing these things. And these lobbying groups that exist in our country, like the U.S. Dairy Council, have made it so that this is so. Is anybody familiar with the term food desert, by the way? Yeah. How about food apartheid? So this is something that we talk a lot about in the food justice community. Food deserts makes it sound like there's no food in certain areas, right, such as in East Oakland or certain parts of San Jose. But people do have access to food. There is food at these liquor stores. It's just not the healthy, nutritious food. And so food apartheid is really recognizing the historic, systemic reasons why this exists, why people do not have access to the nutritious food. What people have access to does inform what they eat. And if people have access only to extremely salty, high-fat, and potentially antibiotic-resistant bacteria-infected foods, it impacts their bodies. This particular graph here I'm seeing is for probably type 2 diabetes, but we have other graphs for cardiovascular disease and other things. And you can see that the people who are more likely to have, in this case, diabetes, are Black Hispanic people and American Indian, American Native people. Okay. And now we've reached another cuteness interlude, so if you have any questions, please write those down. And I will now move into the most important part of our talk, which is about solutions, and I want to hear from you as well. Okay. So at its most basic level, our world leaders agree that we do need to be eating less animal products. This is Project Drawdown. Some of you might have heard of climate activist Paul Hawken. He and his team analyzed the top 100 solutions to address climate change, and you can see that 2 of the top 5 relate to food. This is truly one of the most meaningful ways that we can be addressing climate change, and yet we still spend a lot of time talking about electric cars, we talk about solar panels, all sorts of things, when really food is a huge part of this as well. These ones here are really hard for the individual consumer to be doing something about, which is why that we focus on food. Food waste in this country, by the way, is horrific. It is the equivalent of, say you go to a grocery store, you buy 3 bags of groceries, you might as well just throw one right in the trash as you leave. That's how much food waste we are producing. I actually want to ask you all what you do at San Jose State with your food, because when I was a student at UC Berkeley, we might have an entire tray of lasagna, and if nobody took it, right, it's just sitting there, we would literally throw it in the trash with homeless people right there because we were afraid of getting sued. Last year, California passed the California Good Food Samaritan Act, which means that if you donate food in good faith, then you cannot be sued. So I don't know what's happening here at San Jose State, but if you see any restaurants that have a lot of leftover food, please tell them that they can donate it, and they do not have to worry about being sued. All right, so we're talking about, I'm happy I answer more questions about this, but again, the important thing to recognize is that food really does matter when it comes to climate change. There are a lot of organizations that are doing some incredible work here in the Bay Area. I'm actually going to talk about those later if I have time, because I want to talk about some other initiatives. The first was Meatless Mondays, and Meatless Mondays was started purely as a public health initiative. It was pretty successful. A lot of people reported participating, but my concern with this is that meatless makes it sound like you're missing out on something, like we're taking something away from you, and marketing and branding really does matter when it comes to people's food choices. Another thing that is being proposed as a solution is what's now being branded as cultivated meat. Anybody familiar with cultivated meat? Okay, so we're taking cells from living animals, we're bringing it back to the lab, and we're essentially able to make those cells grow so that we can create a meatball inside of a petri dish. It's the same kind of stem cell research we might use for if I was in a fire and my arm got burned, we could take some skin cells, culture it, and then we could graft new skin onto my body. This is supposed to be on the market within the next 3 to 5 years. It's being argued as something that is more environmentally friendly because without all those animals, you are using less land, less greenhouse gas emissions, way less water. Who here would want to eat it? Wow, a lot of you. I'm impressed. Okay. Some people think that it sounds very disgusting, that it's Frankenstein kind of food. If there's one thing I've learned in my work is people will eat what's sort of in front of them. So there might come a time when this is just what's available at KFC and you just eat it. If it disgusts you, my counterpoint would be that if you look at the way that we're really producing food in the United States, this can actually start to sound a little bit more appealing. If you don't want to eat it, I understand, is being proposed as a solution. Because again, people are concerned about taste, right? Because meat is a part of culture, dairy products have become a part of American culture, so this is going to fulfill some of that need. Other solutions being proposed, you might have heard of some of these products. California is truly the center of meat alternatives, all that kind of technology. Some of you might have had Beyond Meat before. Anybody? Or the Impossible Burger, which was marketed as the burger that bleeds, right? So these companies are based in California. Just is also based in San Francisco. And you can see from this quote, he says, we want the hardcore beef lovers, the guy who's basically saying, you know, I'm literally on the opposite pole from a vegetarian. In no conceivable universe would I accept any substitute for meat. So I want to be clear that this is not necessarily being promoted as a health food, although it's probably healthier because there's way less cholesterol, but it is being marketed to the person who is really heavily reliant on eating animal products right now. Other solutions, you're starting to see these more in the grocery store. There was a time when my students on the Navajo reservation had to drink only dairy milk, and we wouldn't even let the kids drink water at lunch. If my kids now were to go to Walmart in Gallup, New Mexico, though, they would find soy milk and almond milk on the shelves. And that's amazing to me because even when I was growing up, I feel like soy milk and almond milk were like hippie foods only found in specialty stores. But with most human beings being lactose intolerant, there is more demand for these products. And with more demand, there's more supply, and costs have gone down. So I often bring a package of Gardein chicken nuggets with me to presentations. Those cost $3 or $4. There was a time, again, when it was very expensive, but now that there's so much of it, it's more affordable. You can get it at Target, at Walmart, at grocery outlet. Ben & Jerry's came out with a non-dairy line because they saw that there was demand for it, right? They didn't do it necessarily for animal welfare reasons. They did it because there was demand for this. So this is why food choices do matter. The fastest growing sector of the grocery store industry is these plant-based alternatives. All these fast food chains are starting to serve some of these meat alternative products because there is so much demand for it. So you might be wondering, what are people eating? Well, to talk about protein again, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on whole wheat bread contains just as much protein as a Big Mac, but you do not have to be limited to those types of foods. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to eat fast food. I just put that up there so you knew that it was an option if you already go there. Living in the Bay Area, I know that we have access to a lot of different cultural foods, from Indian food to Mediterranean food, Mexican food, all sorts of different things. And as you go around and you start to spread this message and educate people, you can also remind them that 9 out of 10 Americans are not getting enough fruits and vegetables. So eating more of that is another way to help the planet. Okay, so that brings me to the Green Monday campaign. And the Green Monday campaign started in Hong Kong. What we emphasize is that there's no one right way to go about doing Green Monday. It can be routine-based, one day a week. If you're somebody who eats what your family eats at breakfast and at dinner, but at lunch you have control over what you're eating, great. Then a third of your meals could be plant-based. In Hong Kong, a lot of people eat 4 dishes with rice, and we say, hey, if 2 of them have vegetables in it, that's helping. So it's portion reduction. If you're somebody who eats 5 slices of pepperoni pizza, try eating 3 and then 2 of something else. A big thing we talked about at the Global Climate Action Summit was instead of having a steak take up your entire plate, have a bowl, fill it with veggies, rice, whatever, put 2 ounces of steak on top. So you're still getting to enjoy that steak, but you're eating less of it, and that really makes a big difference. Okay. The really cool thing is that we're actually passing Green Monday in cities. So last year when California Governor Jerry Brown brought all these leaders together, he was very proud. I remember him saying that so many cities and counties in the Bay Area have these climate action plans. My concern, though, was that none of them were talking about food. We changed that. This past year, Berkeley became the very first city to pass Green Monday. That means that Berkeley City Council meetings are actually plant-based. Their meetings happen to be on a Tuesday, so it doesn't have to be Monday. Berkeley City-owned facilities are plant-based 1 day a week. With our volunteers and interns, we went to every single restaurant in Berkeley. They all have, to my knowledge, at least one plant-based option, and they're highlighting those plant-based options. And maybe if they charge 25 cents for almond milk, maybe they don't do it at least that one day. It's really a campaign that's focused, again, on the sustainable impact of eating. And if San Jose State students want to join a team, then we would create a tab for you. You could pledge, say 11 students in this class were to say that they could start eating more plant-based 1 day a week or any of the myriad of ways that we talked about, then we can calculate exactly how many gallons of water are saved, how many pounds of carbon. And what we do in cities like Berkeley is we can actually report that to the city council so that they can meet their climate action plan goals. I actually have not reviewed San Jose State's climate action plan, but if the goal is to reduce carbon emissions or to reduce the amount of water that we're using, this could be a really great way to go about doing that. All right, so if people want to pledge Green Monday, you can definitely go to our website. And then I'm going to ask everybody to take out their phones, even though we don't have the greatest reception right now, and to fill out this bit.ly link, bit.ly.com/FFAC Monica. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our internships and then also get some questions from the audience. So I'll give you a minute to do that. So the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition does have internship opportunities as well. We need a lot of support in this work. So if an internship is something that you're interested in pursuing as part of your undergraduate coursework, we do have opportunities available. It can be everything from mentoring our high school students. And we do a lot of different projects. One of them is the Changemaker Project, where we learn about how all these issues relate to social justice, immigrant rights, gender, all these things, environment. And then we go through a design thinking project where we try and come up with solutions. And then at the end in May, we participate in the global pitch event, and you can literally work in teams to get funding for your projects, but you have to pitch it. We also have opportunities to do research, opportunities to make a difference here at San Jose State with your dining facilities, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, you can take my card. I have it back there and also up here at the front. You can also go to our website and apply it too. All right, so I am very interested now in hearing your questions because that was a very basic overview, and there's so much more that I'd love to talk about. So questions, go ahead.
We have a person with a microphone over on that side of the room. Jet will be around a minute, and I'll take care of this side of the room. So there was a hand over there.
So I'd like to know your thoughts on the prospect of a mass human culling in order to reduce factory farming production and emissions in general.
So you're asking me if we should decrease the number of humans, which would decrease the number of livestock, as opposed to just decreasing the number of livestock. I don't think I want to go on the record saying I think that we should kill half of our human population, but certainly we do have an overpopulation crisis.
So the Game Changers little clip that you showed was really inspirational. So I was wondering, if I want to go to a plant-based diet, what are the signs I should look for? Like, I noticed you had the chooseveg.com like listed, but like if we go to a grocery store right now, like what should we look for to kind of decide this is what I should buy instead of a meat product?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to start. Nobody needs to, after viewing this presentation, feel like I pressured them to become vegan or vegetarian or anything like that. We're all about like starting off with those choices. So it can be as simple as if you are at a grocery store and you're thinking about the cereal milk that you want to use, trying to find that alternative. I have, again, like all these little leaflets which have more resources than I can possibly list out right now, but you can email me and I can send you everything too. One of the things I really like to talk about, though, is eggs, specifically as it relates to baking. There was a time when eggs were not included in baking recipes. This only happened after World War II, because during World War II, we were rationing. And then World War II was over, and we're like, hooray, we can be affluent again, and we started adding eggs into things. Do you eat a chocolate chip cookie for like the egg nutrition? No. What does an egg do? It acts as a coagulant, right? It holds everything together. You can do that easily with a ton of products like Energy Egg Replacer, which has been around for decades. It contains, baking soda, baking powder, tapioca, starch. It holds everything together. You get the equivalent of 200 or 300 eggs for $4. Okay? That is a really easy way to save money. It's something that you can be looking for. Remember the whole Betty Crocker thing? There was a time when Betty Crocker said to just add water to their cake mixes, and nobody bought it until they said to start adding eggs to it, right? There's this idea that it's about affluence. I always want us to be thinking more critically about why we eat the way that we do, right? Everything from why do we eat turkey at Thanksgiving, right? Because it wasn't as though the Native Americans and the Pilgrims sat down and ate turkey, right? So why do we eat the way that we do is something that I always want us to be thinking about. Same thing with your baking, with your food choices, just a little bit more conscious thought around it.
Hello.
Hi.
You mentioned osteoporosis. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I'm sorry, I talked about what?
Osteoporosis.
Oh, osteoporosis?
Porosis.
Did he say osteoporosis? Okay. So osteoporosis is a brittle bone disease. It impacts a lot of people in the United States, specifically older women. And so the way to help prevent osteoporosis is to have a lot of calcium in your diet. And so that's why I think, especially in the United States, we've been told to drink so much cow's milk, because cow's milk does have a lot of calcium. But again, it's not absorbable calcium. Yeah?
So just to follow up on that, none of the calcium in cow's milk is absorbable?
You can probably absorb some of it, but like if you want like truly to prevent osteoporosis, to get like really rich calcium sources, the ones that I showed on that slide and that are also talked about in here would be better sources.
All right. You mentioned it, but you didn't really follow up on it. Like, why is the chicken shit pit pink?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good, another synonym for waste, thank you. It's the same reason why this stuff is the color that it is, right? So going back to here, this entire pool is pink because the chicken waste is pink as well, because there's bacteria that feeds off of it, and that turns it like this Pepto-Bismol color. Yeah.
I had a question regarding...
It's not blood. Sometimes people think it's all blood. No, it's not just all blood, it's the bacteria. Go ahead.
I had a question regarding various dairy products.
Dairy
products.
Okay.
And how does both environmentally and health-wise solid dairy, such as cheese products, differ from milk?
Well, cheese probably requires more milk, right? So that has a really big impact. I know that it's hard to reduce cheese consumption. I get that. But it really does require a lot of water, obviously all this pollution happening as well. What else can I say about dairy? Did you have like any other like more specific follow-up questions to that?
I heard that, I don't know the validity behind this, but I've heard that cheese is easier for the human body to digest than just drinking straight from it. I wonder if there's any truth to that.
Oh, I'd have to look that up. I do not know if that is true.
Cheese process brings up lactose. That's why it's easier to chew.
Oh, that's interesting. So one of my friends is a teacher, and he loves Costco, but he's also Chinese. And so he loves the cheese pizzas at Costco. And every single time we go, he also buys this like huge package of lactase pills, and he has to eat them before he eats the Costco cheese pizza. But you're saying that theoretically that's easier to digest than the cow's milk. All right, there you go. We can look that up too. Yes?
Hi, you mentioned that animal agriculture causes more emissions than the entire transportation sector. Is that worldwide or just the United States?
I'm pretty sure that that's worldwide because we also have other graphs showing that some of the top meat and dairy companies emit more greenhouse gas emissions than in literally entire countries. Yeah. And I can send you those slides if you like, if you want to email me. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Okay, over on that side of the room.
Primarily, you mentioned mostly land livestocks, and you didn't really cover anything about seafood. How is your opinion about those as well as fish farms kind of play?
Oh my goodness, I have a lot to say about seafood. I just didn't have time, but I included a slide just in case somebody asked me about it. Okay. So globally, almost 90% of fish stocks are either fully fished or overfished. By 2050, we believe there will be more plastic than fish left in the ocean. In this slide here, I mean, it's going to be loud, so I won't play the whole thing, but it's just showing you like these trawling nets. The issue isn't with somebody going out and fishing and they collect one fish. It's just that most of us aren't doing that. We're buying fish from the grocery store. So we have these gigantic nets higher than the ceiling, miles long, collecting everything in its path. So it's not getting just the fish, it's getting, the turtles, the sharks, all of that. Shrimp in particular has really devastating levels of bycatch. For every 1 pound of shrimp, you get 5 pounds of other sea animals that are killed. And so let me just this is the last slide on this. So what's being proposed is aquaculture, which is essentially factory farming of fish in water. And what we do is we net off entire parts of a river or a lake or the ocean, and we just breed millions of fish. But you have the exact same problems that you do with factory farming, which is that they're way too close together, they're swimming in their own feces, and so you got to give all of them antibiotics. All of this waste, if it's a river, is going directly downstream. So it's really has not been the most sustainable action that we can take, but it is a solution that has been proposed.
Okay, let's give our guest a hand. Thanks, Monica. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.